There's a lot of people here, so I'm going to get moving along. I want to thank Jimmy for all the announcements. Those of you who are here in New York, it'd be great to see you on Sunday. We'll have a little bit of food and a get-together. We intend in the future to have a vibrant virtual community as we're developing, and this will be more like a studio audience since we've become virtual, as you all know, and we're grateful that we've been able to carry our lessons to you. Tonight's lesson is about patterns of thought. What Louise Hay might say the most damaging patterns are self-criticism and judgment. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And I'm going to pass through my messages because Jimmy just covered. Louise Hay studied here at First Church of Religious Science, New York. We now call ourselves First Center. This very congregation is where she learned the science of mind, which is, I have a copy of the book right here. I just want everybody to know what Louise herself was studying under the former pastors. I'm the fourth of four, and Louise studied here. And tonight, before I start the session itself, the textbook I showed you, and then there's another book which is called The Concordance. And in this concordance, you can look up lots of phrases and about healing and the law of cause and effect, and many of the things that you hear us talk about here every Thursday. So I want everybody to understand that what Louise Hay was teaching always was the teaching that we teach her. And this is where she got her, she became a practitioner. This book, which most of you are aware of, You Can Heal Your Life, was published in the late 80s. And it happened to come into my hands, and I became a facilitator, presenter, about a year after it was published. And I was presenting it to people who had healing challenges all over in Florida, churches and hospitals and treatment centers, everywhere and anywhere, and have been steadily facilitating this group for many, many years. And I know it's helped thousands and millions of people. The book itself was an international bestseller, being translated to 28 languages. And why do I say all this stuff? Well, I say it because recently someone said, well, you're not teaching science of mind. And the thing is, I am. It's just, as one of my practitioner friends said to me recently, he said, Greg, you're teaching it with a different wrapper. Ernest Holmes was teaching, his writings were in the late 20s and the 30s, and he was brilliant. He brought the best of psychology, the best of what was known about philosophy and metaphysics together in the textbook. The textbook, though, is a textbook, and it doesn't read, it's not as accessible as the book You Can Heal Your Life, which circled the globe. We have a positive approach, Ernest Holmes said, that we teach. And Louise Hay studied this positive approach to life in her studies of Ernest Holmes. Ernest himself, in describing the teaching, said, what we do, he said, all of our writings detail how people can actively engage their mind in creating change throughout their lives. So I maintain every Thursday, in carrying on this class with Louise, just like Ernest Holmes said, our writings and classes detail how people can actively engage their minds in creating change throughout their lives. Ernest, again, was brilliant. He was a man, he wrote 80 years ago, and his book we all study to this day. So if you were to get more and more involved in metaphysics and learning about the law of attraction and how it really works, and what you've got to do to demonstrate the changes you want in terms of health and healing, inner and outer, we have all the material here, but Thursday night is a really wonderful place to begin the process, and it's Also a great place for those of us who have been in the teaching for years to be reminded of certain things, because we get off track very easily. So Louise came together and she taught people how to live what's called the affirmative life with this incredible book, You Can Heal Your Life. And we've been teaching it ever since. For those of you who are new, every Thursday night at 7 we come together with a different topic, and it's always going to be about self-healing in some way, shape, or form. So I want to look at the patterns of criticism this evening and how they can bring us into distress and what we can do about it. Most of us don't like to think of ourselves as being critical or judgmental. I've heard people tell me that they're not judgmental over the years, and then I hear them tell me everything I should do. And, in the book, Louise says, it's a kind of a funny little passage where she'll say, when you think of yourself as not being judgmental, she'll say, just notice how often you use the word should. And I smiled when I read that the first time, and I still think it's funny, because wherever the word should shows up, it indicates a pattern where you're basically telling yourself, I'm not good enough, I should have done this, I should have done that. Or worse, you're doing that with other people. I always remember my time in Florida when I was running a church group there, and a couple people in particular always were coming my direction with should. It never ended. And and I kept on thinking, my God, what it would be like to have to live with that all the time. And so one of the things, if you can take away from this lesson tonight, is all of us do it, right? We're judgmental. We don't mean to be, right? So we want to find a way to interrupt some of that. Because if I'm sitting here judging, I can think of the people in this building, this room, and if I keep on doing that, I'm incapable of being in new moments with people if I'm always doing that, because I'm dragging in the past, some memory or something into it, and it's very tough for me to be in a new moment when I have this history. So we want to slow down this critical process that many of us are engaged in. We're always judging, analyzing, evaluating. We do it constantly. And we sometimes just respond, or you might say react, without having that space, where you could draw a breath and take in a breath and think, okay, this is a child of God here, and I'm judging them all the time. And so you got the history going with people, and it's very difficult to get out of those types of they're stored responses. So we want to slow it down. We have a lot of patterns within us, and we want to become mindful and see what, if anything, we can do to stop those patterns or take the pause. In one of our earlier classes this year, we say, take the pause that refreshes. It was a slogan from a Coca-Cola commercial from years ago. In the book, one of the lessons with Louise Hay, she says criticism really kills. What does it kill? It kills off your positive flow of energy. It's really a damaging type of thing that we do. And the thing is, you got to look at it from both directions. You have to look at it how you're projecting it, and then you really want to be mindful of how you're doing it to yourself. And in either case, if I'm always judging you guys or whoever they are, I have to remember these are all children of God doing the best they can with what they know, right? So who's got the problem? I have the problem if I'm being judgmental all the time. So I want to be aware of it. One of the greatest lessons you can learn in this class is start to reframe your experience rather than being outer referred and talking about what they're doing, all the fingers pointing, and really start bringing it back to yourself and saying, okay, I'm creating this situation to be this, and I'm creating this to be. And I notice that I'm judging people, places, and things. If you can get a handle on that propensity we have to to be critical. Boy, you've come a long way in advancing yourself. I remember such a beautiful therapeutic group in the 90s, late 90s, I think it was, and the lady was always saying, what are you creating this to be? And see, I would in those days probably be inclined to be talking about what people are doing, and the more interesting question is what you are creating this to be with all my assessments and my critical thinking and my judgmental thoughts, which as you get more involved in this teaching, you begin to let go of a lot of judgment, and you're going to begin to learn to love yourself and stop criticizing yourself. But it's a process of becoming mindful that I am creating my own life. And it's a process for you to begin to understand, like Louise Hayes would say, we're each 100% responsible for our lives. And that's a lot to swallow initially, because she's not suggesting anyone's to blame for anything. It's just she's explaining, like the science of mind would explain, that you are cause to your own experience. So if you want a different outcome in your day-to-day experience, you're called upon to approach things differently, think things differently, and to release different ideas and thoughts. I have a quote from Carlos Ruiz Zafran, who said, "The words which a child's heart is poisoned, whether through malice or through ignorance, remain branded in the child's memory, and sooner or later they burn the child's soul." So what he's trying to talk about, it's kind of a well-known quote, is all of this stuff comes in when we're younger, and it doesn't even have to be through malice, or it could just be through ignorance. It's a part of something where we're being enculturated with a bunch of beliefs. And nobody's to blame, but as we get older, we really want to start examining some of these patterns of thoughts, these critical ideas. When you stop criticizing yourself, Louise stated, you won't feel the need to criticize anybody. So we've got these inner patterns. I have a checklist from the Hay Foundation, I believe it was Louise who wrote it, on the subject, and we can just call it a criticism and judgment checklist. And some of it seems silly, so I'll just read off a few things and see if anything comes up for you, no matter how silly it might sound. You might think that people can't get along. That's true. You might have a belief that, people are rude, and so you've got judgments about people, or you might have judgments about people on the subway or in the road. And, you might wonder how people can be so stupid or ignorant, or as you think of, and then let's take it to, this is usually a hot area for a lot of people. You think of your own body, you look at yourself in the mirror. You might have some judgments about your height or your weight, what you look like. You might be thinking, I'm too heavy, too thin, I don't like this part of my body, or I don't like that, or I don't like this part of my appearance. And you might have a lot of things running within you. Well, I would do this if I weren't so heavy, if I were stronger, or older, younger. And the thing I've learned over the years is anything that you use in your own self-assessment, where you're using the word to, T-O-O, it's an assessment. If I'm saying Jimmy over there or anything are to something or another, what's going to come after that word to is going to be a critical remark, for the most part. And if I do it towards myself, it's the same. So we want to get a handle on, realize, my God, my words, what's the expression from, my word is my wand. You're creating a life experience by what you're saying, and so much criticism comes out of us. So we really want to begin to slow that down if we can, and ask myself, what am I creating this situation to be? So another thing on the checklist, you might be thinking people are klutzes, or they're, you might have other judgments, some such and such, my sister, my friend is a slob, and these people are like noisy, they're rude, they're ignorant. You might think and feel that nobody cares what you think, and you've got all these beliefs that are going on. You might not like the way a person looks, the way a person shows up. You might have judgments about. See, I used to be always concerned about people starting everything on time, and then I was told, "Well, you have time issues," and by that I was told, "Well, you're all worried about other people doing what they're doing." And I say, I was all caught up once upon a time what they should be doing, and so I realized, who's got the problem? I have the problem. Wherever you're out of joint, then you want to look within rather than be looking to other people. Raymond Charles Barker had a great talk once, which was how to change another person, and it was kind of like an in-house joke because you can't change anybody else. So let's look what else could be on our list. Are you critical about your friends? Are you critical about food and restaurants? Are you always the person who's talking about the terrible weather or the terrible service? Do you have lots of judgments or any judgments about the neighbors, anybody who's foreign or different? Music or, just notice if you're being critical about she's got on her checklist, someone's ugly shoes. Do you have critical ideas about men or women or politicians or other parties? And, the point behind all this is we all have a lot of stuff that's running beneath the surface, and it brings forth a lot of distress. At your home, do you have judgments about your apartment, about your house? And ultimately, what this comes to is for you to become more mindful of what your inner dialogue is like, which is the question I ask every Thursday night. What has it been like being you? Has your inner chatter or dialogue been up? I mean, would you be a fun person to be around? Fun people are people who, for the most part, are happy and they're affirming life, and and they're not feeling tortured by life. Is your inner voice picking, or are you seeing life? Are you seeing life through a critical lens? Are you judging everything for the most part? Or are you being self-righteous? Again, that quote: "The words which a child's heart is poisoned, whether through malice or ignorance, remain branded in their memory, and sooner or later they burn into their souls." So we all know how we got the way we got. We all know that we were raised by well-intentioned people, right? I assume that's true for just about everybody. And as adults, we're in the business here of trading in old ideas for new ones. Or what was said to me 30 years ago, we're in the business of trading in the lesser ideas we have for the greater and more expansive ones. I often quote Reverend Bill Cameron, who was one of my first teachers, and he was studying to have a master's degree in psychology and focusing on abnormal psychology. And I always tell that same story because he was so fascinated with the study of the mind. And what we teach here, and what Louise Hay thought, is a lot of illness, if not most, is associated with what happens in your own mind. And as people study psychology, they go to a manual and they diagnose all these illnesses. Well, this guy Bill Cameron in Miami said, I got so good at diagnosing people's illnesses, mental illnesses in particular. He said, I really got good at knowing what was wrong with everybody. And the good thing about his story is he changed his profession from getting a master's in psychology and a doctorate. He came into the ministry because he thought that he was looking at life, by looking at what was wrong with everything, he was approaching life, he thought, in the wrong way. So he turned his whole life around, but he said, I would rather focus on what's good and true about people than keep on training myself to see what's wrong and what's missing. So he was developing a positive approach, and he taught a positive approach, and that's really what we're wanting for everybody here, is to develop a deep positive approach, to develop positive expectancy in your life and have faith in the goodness of life. All our work here every week is done on learning to love the self-esteem, and we're never really able to love ourselves until we go beyond the need to make people wrong, Okay, so wherever we're making people wrong or we're judging people, we are missing the mark. If there is a sin, we're judging other people. Because as Louise taught, that she said so eloquently, that everyone is doing the best that they can with the information, the understanding, and the awareness that they have. I've been teaching that for 2-3 decades. It's like I'm evolving as a person. You are evolving as a person. We make loads of mistakes. Okay, so, but we make progress, and it's a principle in many of the world's religions. You just really understand people are spiritual beings, and they're evolving. And so we want to release the need to make people wrong. We want to release the need to make ourselves wrong. We want to release the need to be critical. We want to release the need to be blaming people so we can have some peace, right? And the reality ultimately and always is that we live, move, and we have our being in this thing we call God, right? This divine energy. We live, we move, we have our being in it. And so we want to slow down all that chatter, that critical stuff. So as kids, we picked it all up from our families, and as young children, we moved into school, and we picked up a lot of other stuff. And so you come into a class like this, and we want to learn to pause and stop ourselves, and we play with it. We'll say, stop in the name of love. Just stop the negative chatter and find ways to be in new moments. Meditate, use affirmations, and slow it all down. And notice where we're being critical, because that's always the wrong approach. And I shouldn't even judge it as being wrong. You know, if that's where a person is, that's where they are. But the thing, it's not the winning approach, right? The winning approach, of course, is to realize that everyone is doing the best that they can. And if you come to a class like this, we're going to gently be suggesting for you to try to see what's good. Refocus. New pair of glasses was the name of a book by Chuck C. So we want to put on a new pair of glasses and see through the lens which would be that life is good and everything is happening is bringing us to a higher place of understanding. Whatever the preconceived ideas that we've had that have come into our lives from our background or our family, we want to release the things that are that need to be released. Louise reminded us that children are not born with prejudice of any kind. They have no strong opinions. They are the absolute embodiment of joy and wonder. And somewhere along the way, they learned to criticize others. And she said it's not natural. So we learned how to criticize ourselves and others. Then she gets into a part of the book where she'll say, do you remember when you were little being scolded or scolded often? Can you recall what the atmosphere was like? Would you describe the atmosphere of your childhood as being loving and supportive? As you recall the people who parented you and your extended family, were they kind to one another? Do you remember how they were to one another and how others were in your family? Because undoubtedly we've picked up patterns from our family. And then the question she would ask in that chapter is, what did you learn about criticism from your mother or your grandmother, grandfather, father? What did you learn during those years? And how do you see yourself now, you know, probably in some ways acting like your family? What, if anything, were the things that, you know, they were critical about? And to what extent do you embrace the same opinions? In what ways were you criticized as a child? And are you taking what was done to you now and extending it to others? What limiting beliefs, as you reflect on your younger life, are you still putting forward into the world? So those are only questions you can ask yourself. I'm giving you things just to think about. You might have opinions about your father or men, or you might have opinions about anything, you know, but look at the judgments and the criticisms. Just see what comes up for you in this lesson, and you might journal them, write them down. And the thing is, whatever you identify, you know, then you want to think about releasing the need for whatever the negative pattern is. Most of us had a father figure of some kind, dad who was either home or not, stepdad, uncle, brother. What were those figures like? What comes up for you regarding these figures? Was your father or the male figures, were they critical? Were they strong opinions? Strong family opinions impact us greatly as children, positively and negatively. How did these people impact you? We have a tendency to remember the best of our parents, of course. I know that's how I do it. But if I want to be really honest, there was other things going on in the family too, of course. So we want to get past the past, is a line that we often say. And the only way we can get past the past is by becoming aware of what the patterns are that were there, that we are continuing to, I'll say, perpetuate. We keep it moving within ourselves. As we come into this teaching, we become mindful of what the chatter is about, and we'll hijack, we'll stop it, because you have power to change your world. That was the great contribution of Ernest Holmes, where he said there's power for good in the universe of which you are a part. So there's power, you're part of the power, and you can change your life. You can heal your life, as Louise said. But the thing is, so to have a different outcome in your life, then there's inner work. So the inner dialogue has to change if you want to have the outer experience to be about healing and joy and peace and prosperity. Louise Hay's checklist goes on to how did your family act with the neighbors, and how did they, did you have, what's your recall on your teachers and the people that were your mentors? Were people always telling you what was lacking and missing? Were they using the word should often? And most likely, if you're using the word should a lot, then it's like, okay, that just tells you right there that there's rigid patterns within you that you probably want to take a look at. And you say to yourself, how's that working out for me with all this rigidity? You're going to find as you learn to love yourself more and release criticism, judgment, that your life is going to become a lot happier and very soon. So there's some things we can do with this teaching that can bring forth great change right away. And getting a handle on these patterns of critical thinking and judgment are one of the quickest things that you can do that will pay big dividends. As you come into this teaching, you learn to practice seeing the good. That becomes your practice, right? Your world will change. It will change quickly. But it is an inner process, and it does involve a little bit of self-awareness. And some of you come through 12-step spiritual programs, and they're perfect for this because the 12-step programs have 2 or 3 inventories. And an inventory is really nothing more than you taking a pause and considering what it is that you're ruminating about, thinking about, and so you can interrupt any and all of these critical patterns. So tonight, as I try to wind this down a little bit, you might want to talk about what patterns that are maybe holding you back that you'd like to release. And then we always get into when we go around, you can say hi wherever you're from, and you could say, look, I'm working on whatever. You don't have to say anything either. But what I'm wanting you to do for yourselves is just think in terms of what you're doing that's maybe working against you, and with the idea behind there's something here that I can release, and I can replace it. So when you're going to release something, you can say, I release the need to be, critical about my boyfriend or my girlfriend or my job. I can release the need to be critical about my body. Instead, I'm going to celebrate the health that I have. I'm going to celebrate the love that I have. So you turn the critical thing, or wherever you're using the word should upon yourself or others, you want to be mindful of what you're doing with the idea that you can change this. You can release this pattern. So make a note of whatever comes up for you. All the work we do at the center is for us to become more aware that it is our life that is creating. It's our life and our consciousness, our thoughts and our feelings that are creating our life. We are always mirroring Our inner understanding is being mirrored in our outer experience. So we'll call that the law of mind or the law of cause and effect. So we have power to turn it around, but it doesn't happen accidentally. We invite, you can say, spirit into our lives, and there is that spirit which is within you that will guide you, because all of life is unfolding, and you're unfolding, I'm unfolding, we're becoming more and more spiritually aware. So let that guidance come in and have the willingness to release any pattern within you that you notice is critical or holding you back. Louise said, perhaps you were led to believe when you were younger that you needed to criticize yourself in order to grow and change. She said that she didn't agree with this at all. Louise Hay maintained through all her writings that we grow best when we maintain a positive living atmosphere. So I think that's it. There's more, but I think that's a good place to break. I'm really wanting to welcome you. We go around once and you can say, hi, I'm from wherever, and comment.